Hey, John Sonmez from simpleprogrammer.com, and this week I want to talk about, yes, a technical topic. I'm going to be talking about test-driven development. I've got a few controversial views on test-driven development, but I'll explain why I hold those views, and hopefully I'll convince you, at least to some degree, of what I'm saying makes some sense. So I used to be a really big proponent of test-driven development. I used to really push for it really hard. Way back when hardly anyone was doing unit tests and definitely not very many people were doing test-driven development, I would often go into an organization or join a team and I'd really push for test-driven development and for unit testing. And this was a good thing. I ended up improving a lot of the quality of code by pushing for test-driven development and pushing for unit testing in general. But I was a little bit too strict about this. I had code coverage requirements of around 95%, asking that 95% of the production code be covered by tests. And obviously my views have changed on test-driven development, or I wouldn't be telling you this, but they haven't changed a huge degree. They've sort of changed to be more pragmatic. At least that's how I think of it. So let me explain, first of all, why I think test-driven development is good. Especially if you're not doing any kind of unit testing at all, I'd encourage you to do some kind of test-driven development. And that's because the biggest benefit for me for doing test-driven development that I've found is it helps you become better at writing good code. And the reason why this is true is because when you write the tests first, it forces you to use the APIs of your code. It forces you to use that production code. So that influences you to make the structure of that code better for being used and to be more understandable. When we just write a bunch of code first and we don't think about how it's going to be used, we are guessing at how people are going to use it or how easy it is going to be to use. But when you write unit tests first and then you write the code to make those unit tests pass, you're basically starting out by defining the API, which is really valuable for writing quality, clear code that's easy to understand. So that's really the big benefit for me. Of course, there's regression as well. You can run those unit tests, but I tend to think that regression is not so important anymore as far as unit testing goes. Now, don't get me wrong. You should still have automated tests at a higher level. But as far as unit testing goes, those regression tests really don't prove much. I've found that in most complicated software systems, when unit tests fail, we have to go in and try to debug this and figure out why did this unit test fail, and most of the time it's a false alarm. I would say that there's very few times that a unit test has failed where I've said, oh, this caught a bug. More often than not, I've gone and said, well, is this test actually correct? Or, oh, yeah, that was expected, or this mock failed. So that's kind of the bad side of it. So let me tell you what I think now. So I think now that test-driven development is sort of like training wheels for writing good code. And it should be used in certain cases, but not all the time. A lot of times we end up just blanket enforcing test-driven development, and what we end up having is code that has tons of mocks or dependencies passed in. We might use inversion of control or dependency inversion containers to try and pass all kinds of dependencies into our code, and then we're just going to mock it up in unit tests when we're doing test-driven development. This is a bad way to go because those tests become harder to write than the actual code, and the test code that we write ends up being error prone. We could have bugs in the test code. So who's going to test the test code? Are we going to write test to test the test code? No, we're not going to do that. So I think it makes a lot of sense to be pragmatic about it. If you're just starting out writing code, you should definitely be doing test-driven development for all your code because you need to learn how to write good code. When I started doing test-driven development, it really taught me how to write good code, how to write good APIs, and really improve the quality of my code. But if you've been writing code for a while, if you've been doing test-driven development, you will probably find this point where you start to feel like these tests aren't adding value. When you feel like tests aren't adding value, this is my personal belief, stop writing those tests. You want to be able to test code with your test-driven development, or when you're writing unit tests, that makes sense, where it's going to give you some value from doing that. If you feel like it's not creating value, stop doing it, because chances are it's not creating value. Now, you can refactor your code and structure your code in such a way that it makes it easier to write unit tests. I've written up on my blog about there's only 2 roles of code. If you do a search for 2 roles of code, you'll find my post. And basically I say that there's algorithms and then there's code that ties everything together. And if you can separate your code out better into those 2 types and not have it mixed together in classes, then you can write unit tests, or you can do test-driven development on the algorithm part, and not have a lot of dependencies, not have to use a lot of mocks, and those tests are going to be highly valuable and it's going to be really beneficial to you. But if you have everything mixed together and you're finding that you're having to write a lot of mocks and you're finding that your test code is really complicated, then you might really want to question the value of doing test-driven development in that case. So overall, what's my view? I think test-driven development is good. It's really, really good for beginners. If you're starting out, you need to start practicing this in order to become better at development. But as you get more experience, you have to use your common sense. You have to be pragmatic about it. And if you feel like tests aren't adding value and they're just wasting time, then that might be true. Well, I hope this video didn't get you too ticked off. I definitely have a different view on test-driven development than I did earlier in my career. But like I said, this comes from my experience. If you disagree with me, let me know. Send me a comment down below, or send me an email. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And hope you have a good week. And I will talk to you again next time. See you later.